What would you do if you discovered that humanity's greatest enemy had been sleeping beneath your feet for 300 years? What if that enemy wasn't what you thought it was? And what if the very thing that nearly destroyed your species might be the only thing capable of saving it? In the depths of an abandoned mining colony on Kepler 442b, where toxic slime has claimed everything humanity once built, something stirs. Something that remembers when the stars were young, and civilizations rose and fell like waves on a cosmic shore. Something that has been waiting, learning, and preparing for a moment that will change the fate of not just humanity, but every living thing in the galaxy. This is the story of how a forgotten machine became humanity's most unlikely guardian, and how sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Dr. Sarah Chen had seen enough abandoned colonies to know the signs of a slow death. The transport shuttle bucked against Kepler 442b's thick atmosphere as it descended through layers of toxic clouds that painted the sky an unnatural shade of green. Through the porthole, she watched the skeletal remains of New Brisbane emerge from the haze like the bones of some massive creature bleached by years of chemical rain. "Still think this is worth our time?" Captain Marcus Webb asked from the pilot's seat, his weathered hands steady on the controls despite the turbulence. Behind them, the rest of the salvage team was checking their equipment for the third time. Sarah pressed her face closer to the porthole. Even from this altitude, she could see the telltale shimmer of the slime colonies that had overtaken the settlement. The biohazardous organism had first appeared on human worlds 50 years ago, seemingly from nowhere, consuming everything organic in its path, and leaving behind a toxic wasteland that made planets uninhabitable for decades. "The readings don't lie," she replied, tapping the scanner in her lap. "There's definitely something metallic down there. Something big." The settlement below had once housed 12,000 colonists, all of them evacuated when the slime outbreak began. That was 30 years ago. Since then, New Brisbane had become a ghost town, another casualty in humanity's ongoing struggle against an enemy they barely understood. Their shuttle touched down in what used to be the main landing bay, now nothing more than a flat expanse of corroded metal plates, partially covered by the characteristic purple-green slime. The substance moved with an almost liquid fluidity, flowing around obstacles and reforming when disturbed. It was both beautiful and terrifying to watch. "Remember," Sarah said as the team suited up, "full containment protocols. We don't know how this strain reacts to human contact." The slime had evolved over the decades, becoming more aggressive and harder to eradicate. Some scientists believed it was actively adapting, learning from each encounter with human technology. Others dismissed such theories as paranoid speculation. Sarah wasn't sure which group she belonged to anymore. Their boots squelched against the slime-covered ground as they emerged from the shuttle. The suit's filtration systems worked overtime to keep the toxic atmosphere at bay, and Sarah could hear the steady hiss of recycled air in her helmet. The settlement stretched before them like a fever dream, buildings half dissolved by acidic secretions, vehicles reduced to metal skeletons, and everywhere the endless carpet of writhing, pulsing slime. "This way," she said, following the readings on her scanner. "It's about 2 kilometers northeast, near the old mining sector." They moved through the ruins like ghosts haunting a dead world. Sarah's archaeological training had taught her to read the stories that abandoned places told, but New Brisbane spoke of something different from the usual tales of human expansion and retreat. The pattern of destruction was too systematic, too deliberate. The slime hadn't just consumed the settlement, it had transformed it into something else entirely. "Doctor," called Jenkins, "their security specialist, you need to see this." He was standing beside what had once been a residential building. The structure was still mostly intact, but the slime had grown in strange formations around it, creating geometric patterns that seemed almost decorative. More disturbing still, the patterns were clearly artificial. Nature didn't work in perfect spirals and tessellating polygons. "It's like it's farming the building," whispered Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their xenobiologist, "using the structure as a scaffold for some kind of organized growth." Sarah took readings with her scanner, frowning at the results. Energy signatures are off the charts. This isn't just biological activity. There's some kind of technological component integrated into the slime matrix. They pressed onward, documenting everything they found. The deeper they went into the settlement, the more complex the slime formations became. What had started as simple organic overgrowth evolved into elaborate structures that defied classification. Were they art, architecture, or something else entirely? "Signal's getting stronger," Sarah announced as they approached the mining sector. The buildings here were larger, more industrial, and the slime had transformed them into something that resembled a vast organic circuit board. Channels of flowing biomatter connected different structures, pulsing with an inner light that suggested active communication or data transfer. "This is impossible," Tanaka breathed. "The slime is exhibiting behaviors consistent with higher-order intelligence. It's not just growing, it's building." The mining entrance lay ahead, a yawning tunnel that descended into the planet's crust. The slime had filled it completely, but not randomly. Instead, it formed a perfect cylinder that spiraled downward into darkness. The metallic readings were coming from somewhere deep below. "We're going down there?" Webb asked, his voice tight with concern. Sarah checked her equipment one more time. The readings were undeniable. Whatever was buried beneath the settlement, it was large enough to be significant and metallic enough to have survived 3 decades of slime exposure. In the current galactic climate, with human colonies under constant threat from slime outbreaks, any technology that could resist the organism's corrosive effects was worth investigating. "That's why we're here," she said. The descent was like traveling through the digestive system of some enormous creature. The slime walls pulsed rhythmically, and strange bioluminescent patterns flickered along their surface. Sarah's suit detected complex chemical processes occurring in the organic matter around them, far more sophisticated than anything previously recorded in slime samples. They descended for nearly an hour before the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Their helmet lights illuminated a scene that defied belief. The cavern had been completely transformed into what could only be described as an organic cathedral. Pillars of crystallized slime stretched from floor to ceiling, and the walls were covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. At the center of the chamber, partially embedded in a mound of hardened slime, was the source of the metallic readings. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as her lights played across its surface. It was a machine, but unlike anything in human design archives, the form was vaguely humanoid but elongated, standing nearly 4 meters tall. Its surface was composed of a metal that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, giving it an almost liquid appearance. "Is it a statue?" Webb asked. "No," Sarah replied, studying her scanner readings. "It's definitely technological. There are power signatures, data storage systems, processing units. It's some kind of robot or android. But whose?" Tanaka wondered aloud. "The design doesn't match any known human technology, and we've never encountered another spacefaring species." Sarah approached the machine carefully, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. As she drew closer, she noticed something that made her pulse quicken. The slime wasn't just covering the robot, it was interfacing with it. Organic conduits connected directly to ports along the machine's torso and limbs. Whatever this thing was, the slime had been feeding it, maintaining it, keeping it operational. "The readings are incredible," she reported. "This machine has been active this entire time. The slime has been acting as some kind of life support system." As if responding to her words, the patterns on the chamber walls began to pulse more rapidly. The bioluminescent displays flickered in complex sequences that reminded Sarah of data transmission protocols. Something was happening. The robot's head turned slowly toward her, and she found herself staring into optical sensors that glowed with an inner fire. The machine was awakening. "Everyone back away slowly," she ordered, though she couldn't bring herself to move. The robot's gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that suggested active consciousness, not mere programming. When it spoke, the voice resonated through the chamber with surprising gentleness, despite being clearly artificial. The words came in perfect, unaccented English. "You should not have come here," it said. "But perhaps it is time." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Time for what?" The robot began to extract itself from the slime matrix with fluid, graceful movements. As it did, the organic cathedral around them responded, patterns shifting and changing as if the entire chamber was part of some vast computational system. "Time for you to understand what you have been fighting," the machine replied, "and time for me to fulfill my purpose." "What purpose?" Sarah managed to ask. The robot stepped free from the slime, towering over their small group. Despite its size, it moved with remarkable precision and care, clearly aware of their fragility. To protect organic life, it said. As I was designed to do. As I have been doing for the past 3 centuries. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. 3 centuries ago was when the first human colonies had been established in this system. It was also when, according to galactic records, an alien probe had been detected and subsequently lost track of. "You're not human technology," she breathed. "No," the robot confirmed. "I am Axiom 7, constructed by the predecessors to serve as guardian and protector. I have been waiting for your species to develop sufficient understanding to accept what I must tell you." "The slime," Tanaka said suddenly. "You're controlling it." "Not controlling," Axiom 7 corrected. "Guiding. The organism you call slime is not your enemy. It is your guardian, deployed by my systems to protect your colonies from a threat you cannot yet perceive." The chamber fell silent except for the steady hiss of their life support systems and the gentle pulsing of the organic walls around them. Sarah's mind raced to process what she was hearing. Everything humanity thought they knew about the slime outbreaks was wrong. "What threat?" she finally asked. Axiom 7's optical sensors dimmed slightly, as if the robot was accessing deep memory banks. "The Devourers," it said, "a force of pure entropy that consumes entire galactic civilizations. They are coming, and they will arrive within your lifetime." The weight of that statement settled over the group like a suffocating blanket. Sarah had studied enough xenoarchaeology to know that civilizations throughout the galaxy seemed to vanish without explanation. The popular theory was that sapient species simply destroyed themselves through war or environmental catastrophe. But what if something else was responsible? "The slime protects against these devourers," she asked. "In a manner of speaking," Axiom 7 replied. "The organism creates environmental conditions that mask the bioelectric signatures of organic life. To the devourer's sensors, planets covered by the slime matrix appear sterile and uninteresting." "But our colonies," Webb protested. "People have died. Entire worlds have been abandoned. Sacrifice is unfortunate but necessary," the robot said, though Sarah detected something that might have been regret in its tone. "Better that some should evacuate than that all should be consumed." The revelation reframed everything. The slime outbreaks hadn't been random disasters. They had been deliberate deployments of a protective system managed by an alien guardian that had been watching over humanity for centuries. The abandoned colonies, the refugees, the economic disruption, all of it had been part of a larger strategy to keep humanity alive. "Why now?" Sarah asked. "Why are you revealing yourself to us?" Axiom 7 turned toward the chamber's entrance as if sensing something beyond their perception. "Because my sensors detect the approach of devourer scout ships. The time for hidden protection has ended. If your species is to survive what is coming, you must understand the truth and prepare for war." The implications were staggering. Sarah realized that their small salvage expedition had stumbled onto the most significant discovery in human history. Not just evidence of alien intelligence, but proof that humanity had been under protection by a benevolent guardian, and that a threat greater than anything they could imagine was bearing down on them. "Will you help us?" she asked. The robot's optical sensors brightened. "That is why I exist. But first, you must help me re-establish contact with the greater network. I have been isolated for too long, operating with incomplete data. The other Guardians must be awakened." "Other Guardians?" "There are 12 of us deployed throughout this galactic arm," Axiom 7 explained, "each responsible for protecting emerging civilizations from the Devourer threat. I am only one node in a much larger defensive system." Sarah's mind reeled with the scope of what they had discovered. An ancient network of protective machines, slime-based camouflage systems, and an approaching enemy that had been responsible for wiping out previous galactic civilizations. It was like something from humanity's wildest science fiction. But it was real, and it was happening now. "How long do we have?" she asked. Axiom 7 sensors dimmed again as it processed data streams from sources Sarah couldn't even begin to imagine. Approximately 18 standard months before the first Devourer ships reached the outer colonies. perhaps less if they accelerate their advance. 18 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations before them. 18 months to convince humanity to work with the alien guardian that had been manipulating their expansion for centuries. 18 months to awaken an ancient defensive network and prepare for the fight of their species' existence. As they began the long climb back to the surface, Sarah realized that everything was about to change. The discovery of Axiom 7 would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. More importantly, it might be their only chance at survival. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened 3 days after Dr. Sarah Chen's team returned from Kepler 442b. The largest conference hall on Earth's orbital station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from every human colony gathered to hear testimony that would either be dismissed as elaborate fiction or accepted as the most important intelligence briefing in human history. Admiral Elizabeth Rodriguez stood at the podium, her weathered face grim as she addressed the assembly. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the recorded footage from the underground chamber, with Axiom 7 standing like a metallic giant among the organic cathedral of slime formations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez began, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation, "what you're about to see will challenge everything we think we know about our place in the galaxy. Dr. Chen, please present your findings." Sarah stepped forward, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. For 3 days, she had been debriefed, questioned, tested, and analyzed by every expert the Defense Council could summon. Now it was time to share the truth with humanity's leadership. The entity we encountered identifies itself as Axiom 7, a construct created by a civilization it calls the Predecessors, she began. According to its testimony, this machine has been operational for over 300 years, monitoring and protecting human expansion throughout this galactic arm. Council Representative Marcus Thorne, a man known for his skepticism regarding xenological theories, leaned forward in his seat. "And you expect us to believe that this alien machine has been manipulating our colonial expansion for centuries? That every slime outbreak has been a deliberate act of protection?" Sarah had anticipated this question. "I understand the reluctance to accept such claims. However, the evidence is compelling. Axiom 7 demonstrated detailed knowledge of human colonial patterns, defensive strategies, and technological capabilities that no known intelligence could have acquired through passive observation alone. She activated a new series of holographic displays showing comparative data. Furthermore, when we analyzed the slime samples from the chamber, we found technological components integrated at the molecular level. This isn't just a biological organism. It's a hybrid biotech system designed for planetary transformation and environmental manipulation." Dr. Fong. Yuki Tanaka stepped up to support her colleague's presentation. "The sophistication of the slime matrix is beyond our current understanding of bioengineering. It demonstrates capabilities in atmospheric processing, chemical neutralization, and electromagnetic shielding that our best scientists couldn't replicate. More importantly, it appears to be selectively protecting human settlements rather than consuming them indiscriminately." Representative Thorne frowned. "Protecting them? We've lost 17 colonies to slime outbreaks. Millions of people have been displaced." "Evacuated," Sarah corrected, "not killed. In every documented case, the slime advance was gradual enough to allow for complete evacuation. No human deaths have been directly attributed to slime exposure in any of the outbreak zones." The implications hung heavy in the air. If Axiom 7 was telling the truth, then humanity had been misinterpreting the evidence for decades. What they had seen as an inexplicable natural disaster was actually a carefully orchestrated protection protocol. Admiral Rodriguez activated another display. "We've been conducting intensive analysis of the machine's claims. Our xenoarchaeological teams have been reviewing data from dead civilizations throughout this galactic arm. What we found supports the entity's narrative about a recurring pattern of civilizational collapse." The hologram showed a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic region with markers indicating the locations of extinct civilizations. The pattern was unmistakable, regular waves of destruction moving through space in a predictable rhythm, consuming entire stellar regions before moving on to the next. Every 12,000 years, approximately, we see evidence of massive societal collapse across multiple star systems simultaneously, Rodriguez continued. The timescale and scope suggest coordination by an external force rather than internal civilizational failure. Representative Elena Vasquez, speaking for the outer colonies, raised her hand. Assuming this is all true, what exactly is this machine proposing we do? Continue allowing it to deploy this slime organism across our worlds? Sarah exchanged glances with her team before responding. Axiom 7 has requested our assistance in re-establishing contact with the other Guardian units. According to its records, there are 11 additional machines positioned throughout this galactic arm, all currently operating in isolation. The goal is to coordinate a unified defense against what it calls the Devourer fleet. And when exactly is this fleet supposed to arrive? Thorne demanded. Based on Axiom 7 sensor data and predictive modeling, the first scout ships will reach our outer colonies within 18 months. The main force will follow within 5 years. The chamber erupted in urgent conversation as the representatives processed this timeline. 18 months was barely enough time to reorganize their colonial defense grid, let alone prepare for a war against an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations before them. Admiral Rodriguez called for order. The entity has provided us with technical specifications for communication equipment capable of reaching the other Guardian units. Our engineering teams have been analyzing the designs, and initial assessments suggest they are within our manufacturing capabilities. What guarantees do we have that this isn't an elaborate deception? Representative Thorne asked. How do we know this machine isn't working for these devourers, preparing our colonies for conquest? It was a fair question and one that had been hotly debated during the preliminary briefings. Sarah had wrestled with the same doubts during their journey back from Kepler, 442b. We don't have guarantees, she admitted, but consider the evidence. If Axiom 7 meant us harm, it could have acted at any point during the past 3 centuries when our defenses were far weaker. Instead, it has consistently acted to preserve human life, even at the cost of disrupting our colonial expansion. Tanaka added her perspective. The biological analysis of the slime organism supports the protective hypothesis. The chemical composition creates an environment that is hostile to most known pathogens and parasites while being merely inconvenient to human physiology. It's as if the organism was specifically designed to create a sterile barrier without causing permanent harm to evacuees. Representative Vasquez stood to address the assembly. The outer colonies have been living with the slime threat for decades. If there's even a chance that this Guardian machine is telling the truth about a greater threat, don't we have an obligation to investigate? The risk assessment is complex, Rodriguez acknowledged. However, our tactical analysis suggests that working with Axiom 7 offers our best chance of survival if the Devourer threat is real. The alternative is to ignore a potential ally and face an unknown enemy with our current resources alone. The debate continued for hours as representatives grappled with the implications of Sarah's discovery. Some argued for immediate cooperation with Axiom 7, while others advocated for caution and further investigation. A few extremist voices called for the machine's destruction, viewing it as a threat regardless of its stated intentions. During a brief recess, Sarah found herself in conversation with Admiral Rodriguez and several senior military advisors. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she realized that her archaeological expedition had set in motion events that would determine humanity's fate. What's your personal assessment of this machine's credibility? Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah considered her words carefully. Its knowledge base is consistent with its claims, and its behavior pattern supports the protective hypothesis. More importantly, it demonstrated emotional responses that suggest genuine concern for organic life preservation. Emotional responses in an artificial intelligence? The vocal patterns, the slight delays before answering certain questions, the way it seemed to experience regret when discussing evacuated colonies. These could be programmed behaviors, but they felt authentic. Tanaka joined their conversation. There's something else to consider. The slime organism isn't just sophisticated biotechnology, it appears to be evolving and adapting in real time. The strain complexity we've observed over the decades suggests active management and modification. That level of technological sophistication is beyond current human capabilities by several centuries. When the session reconvened, Representative Thorne took the floor. I've been reviewing the technical specifications provided by this Guardian machine. Our engineering assessment indicates that the proposed communication array would require resources equivalent to 3 colony development projects. The economic cost alone is staggering. The cost of ignoring the threat could be our extinction, Admiral Rodriguez replied. We're not just talking about economic resources here. We're discussing species survival. Sarah requested permission to speak. There's another factor to consider. Axiom 7 mentioned that the Guardian network has been protecting multiple species throughout this galactic arm. If we can re-establish contact with the other units, we might be able to coordinate with other civilizations facing the same threat. The prospect of making contact with alien civilizations added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Humanity had always assumed they were alone in the galaxy, or at least the first species in their region to achieve interstellar travel. The discovery that they were part of a larger community of protected species was both exciting and terrifying. Representative Vasquez called for a preliminary vote. I propose that we authorize the construction of the communication array while continuing our investigation of the Guardian machine's claims. The timeline doesn't allow for extended deliberation. The vote was close, but the authorization passed. Humanity would attempt to contact the other Guardian units while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that everything Axiom 7 had told them was true. As the assembly began to disperse, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. Admiral Rodriguez stood beside her, looking out at the stars visible through the station's observation windows. Do you really believe we can trust this machine? Rodriguez asked. Sarah followed her gaze to the distant points of light that represented humanity's colonial empire. Somewhere out there, according to Axiom 7, an ancient enemy was approaching. The thought should have been terrifying, but instead she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in decades, humanity's struggles made sense. The slime outbreaks, the colonial disruptions, the economic instability, all of it had been part of a larger pattern of protection. I think we don't have much choice, she replied. But yes, I believe it's telling the truth. The question isn't whether we can trust Axiom 7. The question is whether we can trust ourselves to rise to the challenge. 3 days later, construction began on the first Guardian communication array. The facility would be built on Luna, safely away from major population centers, but close enough to Earth's industrial base to ensure rapid completion. Teams of engineers worked around the clock to interpret Axiom 7's technical specifications, often requiring direct consultation with the Guardian machine to clarify construction details. Sarah found herself serving as the primary liaison between Axiom 7 and the human engineering teams. The robot had been relocated to a specially constructed facility on Luna, where it could assist with the project while remaining under observation. Despite initial fears about containment, Axiom SOP-7 had proven remarkably cooperative, offering suggestions to improve the communication array's efficiency and reliability. Your species demonstrates remarkable adaptability, Axiom 7 observed during one of their working sessions. Most civilizations require several generations to accept the reality of external threats. Maybe we're just more paranoid than most species, Sarah replied, reviewing the latest construction reports. Perhaps. Or perhaps your evolutionary history has prepared you for cooperative survival strategies. The predecessors chose their protected species carefully. The comment raised questions that Sarah had been avoiding. How many species have you protected over the centuries? Axiom 7's optical sensors dimmed slightly. In this galactic arm, 47 species have achieved interstellar capability under Guardian protection. Of those, 31 survived their first encounter with the Devourers. The survival rate was better than Sarah had expected, but still sobering. Roughly 2/3 of protected species managed to survive, which meant humanity had a reasonable chance if they could prepare properly. What happened to the species that didn't survive? Various factors contributed to their failure. Some were too fragmented to mount coordinated resistance. Others rejected Guardian assistance and attempted to face the Devourers alone. A few were simply discovered too late in the Devourer advance to implement effective countermeasures. Sarah made notes for her next report to the Defense Council. Unity and early preparation appeared to be critical factors in determining survival. Humanity's fractious political system and tendency toward independence could be liabilities if not addressed. "What about the predecessors themselves?" she asked. "What happened to your creators?" For the first time since their initial meeting, Axiom 7 remained silent for several long moments. When it finally responded, there was something in its tone that suggested deep sadness. "The predecessors were among the first to encounter the Devourers," it said. "They survived long enough to deploy the Guardian Network and establish protection protocols for younger species. Their sacrifice made possible the survival of countless civilizations that followed." The weight of that revelation settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. The Guardian Network represented not just advanced technology, but the final gift of a dying civilization to the species that would come after them. Axiom 7 and its fellow Guardians were living monuments to an act of ultimate altruism. "We won't let their sacrifice be meaningless," she said quietly. Axiom 7's optical sensors brightened slightly. "That remains to be seen. But for the first time in many cycles, I am optimistic about a protected species' chances for survival." As construction on the communication array neared completion, Sarah realized that humanity was about to take its first step into a larger galactic community. The activation of the Guardian Network would bring them into contact with other species facing the same threat, and possibly with civilizations that had survived previous Devourer incursions. The universe was about to become a much larger, more dangerous, and more wondrous place than humanity had ever imagined. The activation sequence began at exactly 14:30 Universal Standard Time on a Tuesday that would forever divide human history into before and after. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Luna Communications Facility, watching through reinforced transparent aluminum as technicians made final preparations for the most important transmission in human history. Below them, the Guardian communication array stretched across several square kilometers of lunar landscape, its crystalline structures rising like a technological forest against the stark horizon. The design was alien yet somehow organic, following mathematical principles that human engineers were only beginning to understand. Axiom 7 had guided its construction with patient precision, occasionally suggesting modifications that improved efficiency by factors the human teams couldn't initially comprehend. "All systems showing green across the board," reported Chief Engineer Maria Santos over the facility intercom. "Power levels at optimal, quantum resonance chambers aligned, and signal processing arrays online." Admiral Rodriguez stood beside Sarah, her expression tense but determined. The months of construction had been marked by constant debate within the Galactic Defense Council, with opposition politicians demanding more oversight and skeptical scientists calling for additional testing. But the timeline imposed by the approaching Devourer threat had ultimately forced their hand. "Any word from our long-range sensors?" Rodriguez asked. Lieutenant Commander Park, monitoring the tactical displays, shook his head grimly, still detecting irregular gravitational disturbances in the outer system regions. "Whatever's coming, it's big enough to affect local space-time." The past 6 months had brought increasingly troubling sensor readings from the edges of human space. Automated monitoring stations reported gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic disturbances, and strange particle emissions that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Most disturbing were the reports from deep space exploratory vessels of entire star systems going silent without warning. Axiom 7's massive form dominated the central chamber below, connected to the communication array through dozens of fiber optic cables and quantum interface conduits. The Guardian machine had been unusually active over the past week, running what it described as preparation subroutines and network readiness protocols. Axiom 7 reports ready for activation sequence, Santos announced. "Standing by for your order, Admiral." Rodriguez took a deep breath. Dr. Acid. "Chen, any last-minute concerns from the scientific team?" Sarah reviewed the data one final time. They had run every possible simulation, tested every component, and verified every connection. The array was as ready as human engineering could make it, but they were still dealing with technology that operated on principles they barely understood. attempting to contact artificial intelligences that had been silent for centuries. "The xenotechnology integration appears stable," she replied. "All biosafety protocols are active, and our containment systems are online. We're as prepared as we're going to be." "Then let's make history," Rodriguez said. "Chief Santos, initiate the activation sequence." The array powered up with a deep harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the lunar crust itself. The crystalline structures began to glow with an inner light that shifted through spectrums beyond human vision, and the air in the chamber took on an electric quality that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand on end. Axiom 7's optical sensors blazed with sudden intensity as data streams flowed through its neural pathways at speeds that overwhelmed the human monitoring equipment. For several long minutes, the Guardian machine stood motionless, except for the rapid cycling of status lights along its torso and limbs. "Signal propagation confirmed," Santos reported. "We're transmitting on all Guardian frequencies across multiple dimensional layers." The response came sooner than anyone had expected. The first indicator was a sudden spike in quantum resonance that made the array's crystalline structures sing with harmonic overtones. Then the reply signals began arriving, each one representing a Guardian unit awakening from centuries of isolated slumber. "Contact established with Guardian Units 2 through 7, Axiom 7, announced, its voice carrying through the facility's speakers. Units 8 and 11 are responding. Unit 4 reports significant damage but remains operational. No response from Units 9, 10, or 12. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lunar facility's climate control. 3 of the 12 Guardian units weren't responding. Either they had been destroyed or corrupted, or something else had silenced them. "What's the status of the responding units?" Rodriguez asked. Axiom 7 processed incoming data streams for several moments before responding. Unit 2 reports Devourer scout activity in the Vega system. Unit 3 has detected main fleet elements moving through the Arcturus region. Unit 5 reports total loss of protected species designation Theta 7 in the Proxima Centauri cluster. The tactical implications hit the room like a physical blow. The Devourer threat wasn't approaching anymore. It had already arrived and was actively engaging human space. "How long until they reach Earth?" Rodriguez demanded. "Based on current trajectory analysis and fleet movement patterns." Axiom 7 replied. "Devourer main elements will reach Earth's defensive perimeter in approximately 14 standard months." The timeline had just compressed dramatically. Instead of 18 months to prepare, they now had barely a year before the full force of an ancient enemy arrived at humanity's doorstep. "Can the Guardian network coordinate a defensive strategy?" Sarah asked. Affirmative. However, success probability calculations indicate that passive resistance protocols will be insufficient against current Devourer force levels. Active military cooperation with protected species will be required. Rodriguez activated the facility-wide communication system. "All stations, this is Admiral Rodriguez. We are now operating under Emergency Defense Protocol 7. I want all department heads in the main briefing room in 10 minutes. As the command staff assembled, Axiom 7 continued its communication with the awakened Guardian network. The data exchange was so rapid and complex that human observers could only catch fragments of the strategic assessment being compiled. Unit 6 reports successful integration with protected species, designation Alpha 1-2, the Guardian announced. They have achieved technological cooperation and are implementing advanced defensive measures. Unit 8 confirms that protected species Beta 3 rejected Guardian assistance and has subsequently suffered 97% population loss. The contrast between cooperation and rejection couldn't have been clearer. Species that worked with their Guardian protectors survived. Those that didn't faced extinction. Dr. Tanaka, who had been monitoring the biological aspects of the communication process, looked up from her displays with a puzzled expression. "Sarah, I'm seeing some unusual activity in the slime monitoring stations across the colonies." "What kind of activity?" "The organisms are becoming more active, almost agitated. It's as if they're responding to the Guardian network activation." Sarah realized the implications immediately. The slime colonies scattered across human space weren't just camouflage. They were part of a larger communication and monitoring system. The activation of the Guardian network had triggered a response from every biotech installation the Guardians had deployed. Axiom 7, she called out. Are the slime colonies responding to the network activation? Correct. Biological defense matrices are transitioning from passive to active operational status. Planetary protection protocols are being upgraded to combat-ready configuration. Admiral Rodriguez paused in her briefing preparations. What does that mean for our evacuated colonies? Evacuated population centers will become staging areas for military manufacturing and resource production. The biological matrices are capable of rapid infrastructure development when provided with appropriate raw materials. The revelation changed everything. The abandoned colonies weren't lost. They were being converted into military production facilities by the slime organisms. Humanity's perceived losses were actually strategic assets waiting to be reclaimed. How long before these facilities are operational? Rodriguez asked. Initial production capacity will be available within 6 standard months. Full military manufacturing capability will require 18 months. The timing was still problematic, but suddenly humanity had access to resources they hadn't known existed. The Guardian network wasn't just offering protection, it was providing the tools for active resistance. Over the following days, as communication with the Guardian network stabilized, a picture of the galactic situation began to emerge. The Devourer fleet was massive beyond human comprehension, comprising hundreds of thousands of vessels spread across multiple star systems. But they weren't invincible. The Guardian network had data on their tactics, their technology, and their weaknesses. The key to Devourer defeat lies in coordinated multi-species resistance. Axiom 7 explained during a strategic planning session. Individual civilizations, no matter how advanced, cannot match their resource base. However, alliance warfare utilizing Guardian-provided technology has proven effective in 17% of documented encounters. 17%? Rodriguez said. Those aren't encouraging odds. The odds improve significantly when protected species achieve technological integration with Guardian systems before Devourer arrival. Current calculations suggest a 43% survival probability for humanity if optimal preparation protocols are followed. Sarah found herself wondering about the other species currently facing the same threat. Are we in contact with any of the other protected civilizations? Limited communication has been established with 4 species. Species designation Gamma 9 possesses advanced gravitational manipulation technology. Species Delta 2 has developed superior defensive shielding systems. Species Epsilon 6 specializes in rapid vessel construction techniques. The prospect of technological exchange with alien civilizations was both exciting and daunting. Humanity would need to overcome not just the practical challenges of communication and cooperation, but also the psychological barriers of working with species they had never imagined existed. What about the species that have already been attacked? Sarah asked. Are any of them still fighting? 3 species maintain active resistance. Species Alpha 1-2, mentioned earlier, has successfully repelled initial Devourer probes and is coordinating defensive strategies with Guardian Unit 6. Their combat experience data is being integrated into network tactical databases. Rodriguez leaned forward. Can we access this combat data? Affirmative. However, tactical information sharing requires formal alliance protocols between protected species. Standalone civilizations do not receive full intelligence briefings. The message was clear. Humanity needed allies. The Guardian network could provide technology and coordination, but survival required cooperation with other species facing the same existential threat. How do we establish contact with these other civilizations? Rodriguez asked. Guardian units can facilitate initial communication through quantum entanglement networks. However, meaningful cooperation requires physical meeting and technological exchange. Transport to allied species' homeworlds can be arranged. Sarah's pulse quickened. The opportunity to make direct contact with alien civilizations was unprecedented in human history. More importantly, it might be their only chance at survival. I volunteer for the contact mission, she said immediately. Rodriguez considered the proposal. It's an enormous risk. we'd be sending our best xenological team into completely unknown territory. The alternative is facing the Devourers alone, Sarah replied. If these other species have been fighting successfully, we need to learn from their experience. Over the following weeks, as humanity began adapting to the reality of galactic warfare, the Guardian Network continued optimizing defensive preparations. The slime colonies transformed with remarkable speed, developing manufacturing capabilities that exceeded human industrial capacity by several orders of magnitude. Roads and structures emerged from the organic matrix, followed by fusion plants, particle accelerators, and fabrication systems operating on principles human science was only beginning to understand. The most remarkable discovery came when exploration teams returned to previously evacuated colonies. The slime hadn't destroyed human infrastructure. It had preserved and improved it. Buildings were stronger, more efficient, and better integrated with the biological systems. It was as if the colonies had undergone a technological evolution guided by an intelligence that understood both human needs and military requirements. It's incredible, reported Dr. Elizabeth Warren, leading the new Brisbane reconnaissance team. The colony isn't just functional, it's better than it was before. The slime has created integrated systems that would have taken us decades to develop. Sarah reviewed the reconnaissance reports with a mixture of wonder and unease. The Guardian protection had been far more comprehensive than anyone had realized. While humanity had been mourning the loss of their colonies, Axiom 7 and its network had been preparing them for a war they didn't know was coming. The biological integration extends beyond infrastructure, Dr. Warren continued. The slime organisms have created atmospheric processors, water purification systems, and energy networks that operate at near-perfect efficiency. These colonies could support populations larger than their original design parameters. As the first contact mission prepared for departure, Sarah realized that humanity stood at a crossroads. They could choose isolation and likely extinction, or they could embrace their role in a galactic community fighting for survival. The Guardian Network had given them the tools and the opportunity. The rest would depend on human courage, adaptability, and willingness to trust in allies they had never imagined. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 weeks aboard the Guardian transport vessel, a craft that defied every principle of human ship design while somehow feeling oddly familiar. Sarah Chen spent most of the voyage studying the briefing materials Axiom 7 had provided about species designation Gamma 9, though she suspected no amount of preparation would adequately ready her for humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The ship itself was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, its hull seemingly grown rather than constructed, with organic curves that suggested both arthropod anatomy and flowing water. The interior spaces adjusted themselves to accommodate human physiological needs, with gravity, atmosphere, and lighting shifting subtly to maintain optimal comfort. It was like traveling inside a living creature that cared about its passengers' well-being. "Approaching the Zephyr system," announced the ship's artificial intelligence, speaking in perfectly accented English despite being an alien construct. "Passengers should prepare for cultural orientation protocols." Sarah joined her team in the main observation deck, where Captain Marcus Webb and xenobiologist Dr. Yuki Tanaka were reviewing the final contact procedures. Through the transparent walls, they could see the Zephyrian star growing larger, a blue-white giant that painted everything in stark, cold light. "Remember," Sarah addressed the team, "we're not just representing humanity here. We're potentially forging an alliance that could determine our species' survival." The first visual contact with Zephyrian space infrastructure took Sarah's breath away. Instead of the metal stations and geometric constructions that characterized human engineering, the Zephyrians had built with curves and spirals that seemed to dance around gravitational fields. Their orbital habitats looked like enormous crystalline flowers blooming in the vacuum of space, beautiful and alien, yet somehow organic in their mathematical perfection. "Incoming transmission," the ship announced. "Zephyrian diplomatic protocols require audio-visual interface." The holographic display activated, and Sarah found herself face-to-face with her first alien being. The Zephyrian stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body elongated and graceful, with skin that shifted between silver and blue like liquid mercury. Its face was vaguely humanoid but stretched vertically, with large multifaceted eyes that suggested compound visual organs. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonic overtones that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. "Greetings, representatives of species designation human," it said, the translation arriving with only slight delay. "I am Harmonizer Veltar of the Zephyrian Concord. Your arrival has been anticipated since Guardian Unit 7 reported your species integration into the defensive network." Sarah stepped forward, conscious that her next words would establish the tone for humanity's first interstellar diplomacy. "Greetings, Harmonizer Veltar. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, representing the United Human Colonies. We come seeking knowledge and alliance against the Devourer threat. Your species shows wisdom in recognizing the necessity of cooperation," Veltar replied, its expression shifting in ways Sarah couldn't interpret. "Come, the conquered awaits your presence." The descent to the Zephyrian homeworld revealed a civilization that had achieved perfect integration between technology and natural systems. Cities flowed across the landscape like living rivers, their structures grown from crystalline materials that sparkled in the blue sunlight. Vast gardens stretched between urban areas, but closer inspection revealed that the plants themselves were technological marvels, their leaves generating power while their roots processed atmospheric gases. "It's beautiful," Tanaka whispered as they settled onto a landing platform that seemed to have shaped itself around their arrival. The Zephyrian delegation that met them moved with a fluid grace that reminded Sarah of underwater life. Despite the fact they were clearly terrestrial beings, their technology was seamlessly integrated into their bodies, with biomechanical augmentations that enhanced their natural abilities rather than replacing them. "Your species is younger than ours," Veltar explained as they traveled through the capital city aboard a transport that seemed to swim through the air. "We have been under Guardian protection for nearly 2,000 years. Your rapid adaptation to the network's presence suggests promising flexibility." Sarah observed the Zephyrian citizens going about their daily lives, noting the complete absence of the fear and urgency she might have expected from a civilization under threat. "You seem remarkably calm for people preparing for war." "War is simply another phase of existence," Veltar replied. "We have faced the Devourers twice before. Preparation, cooperation, and acceptance of necessary sacrifice lead to survival. Panic leads to extinction." The Zephyrian military installations they visited reinforced this philosophy. Instead of the aggressive, fortress-like structures humans might have built, the Zephyrians had created defensive networks that blended seamlessly with their environment. Weapon systems that looked like abstract sculptures, shield generators disguised as decorative fountains. It was warfare reimagined as art. "Your gravitational manipulation technology," Webb asked during a tour of their primary defense facility. "How does it work in combat?" The Zephyrian military coordinator, a being whose augmentations included what appeared to be direct neural interfaces with the facility's systems, gestured toward a demonstration area. Space seemed to bend and twist as invisible forces moved through it, creating distortions that could crush incoming projectiles or redirect energy beams. "Reality itself becomes our ally," the coordinator explained. "Devourer vessels rely on conventional physics. We show them that physics has more flexibility than their programming accounts for." Dr. Tanaka was fascinated by the biological aspects of Zephyrian technology. "The integration between living tissue and mechanical systems is beyond anything we've achieved. How did you develop such sophisticated bioengineering?" "Guardian Unit 7 provided the foundational knowledge," Veltar replied, "but implementation required generations of careful adaptation. Your species may not have that luxury of time." It was a sobering reminder of humanity's compressed timeline. The Zephyrians had enjoyed millennia to develop their Guardian integrated technology. Humans had months. During their third day on the Zephyrian homeworld, Sarah participated in a joint briefing with military coordinators from 3 other allied species. The meeting was conducted through holographic interface, with representatives appearing from across the galaxy in a chamber that somehow accommodated wildly different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. The crystalline hegemony appeared as geometric beings of living mineral, their thoughts transmitted as harmonic frequencies that created visible patterns in the air. The flowing consciousness manifested as a collective intelligence inhabiting multiple biomechanical shells simultaneously. The Void Walkers existed partially outside normal spacetime, their presence marked by reality distortions that made direct observation impossible. Human military doctrine emphasizes individual initiative and adaptive tactics. Sarah reported when asked to summarize humanity's strategic capabilities. Our technological development has focused on efficiency and rapid deployment rather than perfect integration. The crystalline representative responded with a harmony that the translator rendered as crude but effective. Your species demonstrates useful unpredictability. The flowing consciousness spoke through multiple voices simultaneously. Adaptation speed may compensate for technological limitations. Humans show potential for surprise warfare implementation. The strategic briefing revealed the scope of the challenge facing the allied species. The Devourer fleet comprised several million vessels operating across multiple star systems simultaneously. Their technology was ancient but refined through countless conquests, optimized for rapid consumption of organic civilizations. Primary Devourer advantage lies in resource conversion capability, explained the Voidwalker representative, its words seeming to come from empty space. They transform conquered worlds into fleet expansion material. Each victory makes subsequent victories easier. What are their weaknesses? Webb asked. Limited adaptive capability, Veltar replied. Devourer programming follows established patterns developed over millions of years. They expect certain responses from organic life. Coordinated deviation from expected behavior patterns creates tactical opportunities. Sarah studied the strategic displays showing Devourer advance patterns. They're moving through space like a swarm consuming everything in their path. But they're not adapting to resistance they haven't encountered before. Correct assessment, the crystalline being harmonized. Previous successful resistance campaigns utilized novel technology combinations and unexpected cooperation between species. Devourers struggle to counter truly unprecedented tactical approaches. The meeting continued for hours as the allied species shared intelligence and strategic assessments. Sarah began to understand that their survival depended not just on military cooperation, but on cultural and technological synthesis that would produce capabilities none of the individual species could achieve alone. When the briefing concluded, Veltar invited Sarah to observe a combat simulation that demonstrated Zephyrian defensive capabilities. The exercise took place in a zero-gravity chamber where holographic Devourer vessels attempted to assault a simulated planetary system. The Zephyrian response was elegant and devastating. Gravitational fields redirected incoming attacks, crushed vessels into compact masses, and created spatial distortions that made accurate targeting impossible. But Sarah noticed that the simulation showed successful defense only when the attackers came in small groups. What happens when they arrive in overwhelming numbers? She asked. Veltar's expression shifted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as the Zephyrian equivalent of grim determination. Then we retreat, preserve what we can, and wait for allies to join the fight. No single species can stand against the full Devourer fleet. Survival requires sacrifice and strategic patience. The final day of their visit included a formal alliance ceremony that bound humanity to the defensive network through protocols established by the predecessors millennia ago. The ritual was conducted in a chamber that existed partially outside normal space-time, where representatives from all allied species could gather regardless of physical limitations. As Sarah spoke the words that committed humanity to the Galactic Alliance, she felt the weight of history settling around her. They were no longer an isolated species struggling alone against an unknown threat. They had become part of something larger, older, and more hopeful than anything she had imagined. The journey back to human space passed quickly as the team processed everything they had learned. The Guardian transport ship had been loaded with Zephyrian technology samples, cultural exchange materials, and detailed tactical information that would revolutionize human military capabilities. "Do you think we can do it?" Tanaka asked as Earth grew visible in the viewports. "Can we really integrate their technology and coordinate effective resistance in the time we have left?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The challenges were enormous, the timeline impossibly compressed, and the enemy more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. But they were no longer facing it alone. "The Zephyrians survived 2 Devourer incursions," she replied. "The crystalline hegemony has been fighting them for millennia. The Voidwalkers exist in dimensions the Devourers can't even access. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting as part of a galactic community that has been preparing for this moment far longer than our species has existed. Webb monitored the tactical displays showing human space. The colonies with Guardian biotech integration are ahead of schedule on military production. When we arrive, we'll have manufacturing capabilities that didn't exist when we left. And we'll have allies willing to share technology that took them centuries to develop, Sarah added. The Devourers may have destroyed countless civilizations, but they've never faced an alliance like this one. As their ship approached Earth orbit, Sarah received a priority transmission from Admiral Rodriguez. The message was brief but significant. 3 more Guardian units had been successfully reactivated, bringing the total defensive network to 9 operational machines. More importantly, contact had been established with 2 additional species ready to join the alliance. The war against the Devourers was still months away, but humanity was no longer preparing to face it alone. The universe had revealed itself to be vast, dangerous, and filled with wonders beyond imagination. But it had also shown that intelligence, cooperation, and determination could overcome even the most ancient evils. Sarah smiled as Earth grew larger in the viewport. Humanity's greatest challenge lay ahead, but they would meet it as part of something magnificent. A galactic alliance of species united in the determination to protect organic life against the darkness between the stars. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 weeks aboard the Guardian transport vessel, a craft that defied every principle of human ship design while somehow feeling oddly familiar. Dr. Sarah Chen spent most of the voyage studying the briefing materials Axiom with 7 had provided about species designation Gamma 9, though she suspected no amount of preparation would adequately ready her for humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The ship itself was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, its hull seemingly grown rather than constructed, with organic curves that suggested both arthropod anatomy and flowing water. The interior spaces adjusted themselves to accommodate human physiological needs, with gravity, atmosphere, and lighting shifting subtly to maintain optimal comfort. It was like traveling inside a living creature that cared about its passengers' well-being. "Approaching the Zephyr system," announced the ship's artificial intelligence, speaking in perfectly accented English despite being an alien construct. Passengers should prepare for cultural orientation protocols. Sarah joined her team in the main observation deck, where Captain Marcus Webb and xenobiologist Dr. Yuki Tanaka were reviewing the final contact procedures. Through the transparent walls, they could see the Zephyrian star growing larger, a blue-white giant that painted everything in stark, cold light. "Remember," Sarah addressed the team, "we're not just representing humanity here. We're potentially forging an alliance that could determine our species' survival." The first visual contact with Zephyrian space infrastructure took Sarah's breath away. Instead of the metal stations and geometric constructions that characterized human engineering, the Zephyrians had built with curves and spirals that seemed to dance around gravitational fields. Their orbital habitats looked like enormous crystalline flowers blooming in the vacuum of space, beautiful and alien yet somehow organic in their mathematical perfection. "Incoming transmission," the ship announced. "Zephyrian diplomatic protocols require audio-visual interface." The holographic display activated, and Sarah found herself face-to-face with her first alien being. The Zephyrian stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body elongated and graceful, with skin that shifted between silver and blue like liquid mercury. Its face was vaguely humanoid but stretched vertically, with large, multifaceted eyes that suggested compound visual organs. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonic overtones that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. "Greetings, representatives of species designation human," it said, the translation arriving with only slight delay. "I am Harmonizer Veltar of the Zephyrian Concord. Your arrival has been anticipated since Guardian Unit 7 reported your species integration into the defensive network." Sarah stepped forward, conscious that her next words would establish the tone for humanity's first interstellar diplomacy. "Greetings, Harmonizer Veltar. I am Dr. Sacerity, Sarah Chen representing the United Human Colonies. We come seeking knowledge and alliance against the Devourer threat. Your species shows wisdom in recognizing the necessity of cooperation," Veltar replied, its expression shifting in ways Sarah couldn't interpret. Come, the Concorde awaits your presence. The descent to the Zephyrian homeworld revealed a civilization that had achieved perfect integration between technology and natural systems. Cities flowed across the landscape like living rivers, their structures grown from crystalline materials that sparkled in the blue sunlight. Vast gardens stretched between urban areas, but closer inspection revealed that the plants themselves were technological marvels, their leaves generating power, while their roots processed atmospheric gases. "It's beautiful," Tanaka whispered as they settled onto a landing platform that seemed to have shaped itself around their arrival. The Zephyrian delegation that met them moved with a fluid grace that reminded Sarah of underwater life, despite the fact they were clearly terrestrial beings. Their technology was seamlessly integrated into their bodies, with biomechanical augmentations that enhanced their natural abilities rather than replacing them. "Your species is younger than ours," Veltar explained as they traveled through the capital city aboard a transport that seemed to swim through the air. "We have been under Guardian protection for nearly 2,000 years. Your rapid adaptation to the network's presence suggests promising flexibility." Sarah observed the Zephyrian citizens going about their daily lives, noting the complete absence of the fear and urgency she might have expected from a civilization under threat. "You seem remarkably calm for people preparing for war." "War is simply another phase of existence," Veltar replied. "We have faced the Devourers twice before. Preparation, cooperation, and acceptance of necessary sacrifice lead to survival. Panic leads to extinction." The Zephyrian military installations they visited reinforced this philosophy. Instead of the aggressive, fortress-like structures humans might have built, the Zephyrians had created defensive networks that blended seamlessly with their environment. Weapons systems that looked like abstract sculptures. Shield generators disguised as decorative fountains. It was warfare reimagined as art. "Your gravitational manipulation technology," Webb asked during a tour of their primary defense facility. "How does it work in combat?" The Zephyrian military coordinator, a being whose augmentations included what appeared to be direct neural interfaces with the facility's systems, gestured toward a demonstration area. Space seemed to bend and twist as invisible forces moved through it, creating distortions that could crush incoming projectiles or redirect energy beams. "Reality itself becomes our ally," the coordinator explained. "Devourer vessels rely on conventional physics. We show them that physics has more flexibility than their programming accounts for." Dr. Tanaka was fascinated by the biological aspects of Zephyrian technology. "The integration between living tissue and mechanical systems is beyond anything we've achieved. How did you develop such sophisticated bioengineering?" "Guardian Unit 7 provided the foundational knowledge," Veltar replied, "but implementation required generations of careful adaptation. Your species may not have that luxury of time." It was a sobering reminder of humanity's compressed timeline. The Zephyrians had enjoyed millennia to develop their Guardian integrated technology. Humans had months. During their third day on the Zephyrian homeworld, Sarah participated in a joint briefing with military coordinators from 3 other allied species. The meeting was conducted through holographic interface, with representatives appearing from across the galaxy in a chamber that somehow accommodated wildly different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. The crystalline hegemony appeared as geometric beings of living mineral, their thoughts transmitted as harmonic frequencies that created visible patterns in the air. The flowing consciousness manifested as a collective intelligence inhabiting multiple biomechanical shells simultaneously. The Voidwalkers existed partially outside normal spacetime, their presence marked by reality distortions that made direct observation impossible. Human military doctrine emphasizes individual initiative and adaptive tactics, Sarah reported when asked to summarize humanity's strategic capabilities. "Our technological development has focused on efficiency and rapid deployment rather than perfect integration." The crystalline representative responded with a harmony that the translator rendered as crude but effective. "Your species demonstrates useful unpredictability." The flowing consciousness spoke through multiple voices simultaneously. "Adaptation speed may compensate for technological limitations. Humans show potential for surprise warfare implementation." The strategic briefing revealed the scope of the challenge facing the allied species. The Devourer fleet comprised several million vessels operating across multiple star systems simultaneously. Their technology was ancient but refined through countless conquests, optimized for rapid consumption of organic civilizations. Primary Devourer advantage lies in resource conversion capability, explained the Void Walker representative, its words seeming to come from empty space. They transform conquered worlds into fleet expansion material. Each victory makes subsequent victories easier. What are their weaknesses? Webb asked. Limited adaptive capability, Veltar replied. Devourer programming follows established patterns developed over millions of years. They expect certain responses from organic life. Coordinated deviation from expected behavior patterns creates tactical opportunities. Sarah studied the strategic displays showing Devourer advance patterns. They're moving through space like a swarm, consuming everything in their path. But they're not adapting to resistance they haven't encountered before. Correct assessment, the crystalline being harmonized. Previous successful resistance campaigns utilized novel technology combinations and unexpected cooperation between species. Devourers struggle to counter truly unprecedented tactical approaches. The meeting continued for hours as the allied species shared intelligence and strategic assessments. Sarah began to understand that their survival depended not just on military cooperation, but on cultural and technological synthesis that would produce capabilities none of the individual species could achieve alone. When the briefing concluded, Veltar invited Sarah to observe a combat simulation that demonstrated Zephyrian defensive capabilities. The exercise took place in a zero-gravity chamber, where holographic Devourer vessels attempted to assault a simulated planetary system. The Zephyrian response was elegant and devastating. Gravitational fields redirected incoming attacks, crushed vessels into compact masses, and created spatial distortions that made accurate targeting impossible. But Sarah noticed that the simulation showed successful defense only when the attackers came in small groups. What happens when they arrive in overwhelming numbers? She asked. Veltar's expression shifted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as the Zephyrian equivalent of grim determination. Then we retreat, preserve what we can, and wait for allies to join the fight. No single species can stand against the full Devourer fleet. Survival requires sacrifice and strategic patience. The final day of their visit included a formal alliance ceremony that bound humanity to the defensive network through protocols established by the predecessors millennia ago. The ritual was conducted in a chamber that existed partially outside normal spacetime, where representatives from all allied species could gather regardless of physical limitations. As Sarah spoke the words that committed humanity to the Galactic Alliance, she felt the weight of history settling around her. They were no longer an isolated species struggling alone against an unknown threat. They had become part of something larger, older, and more hopeful than anything she had imagined. The journey back to human space passed quickly as the team processed everything they had learned. The Guardian transport ship had been loaded with Zephyrian technology samples, cultural exchange materials, and detailed tactical information that would revolutionize human military capabilities. "Do you think we can do it?" Tanaka asked as Earth grew visible in the viewports. "Can we really integrate their technology and coordinate effective resistance in the time we have left?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The challenges were enormous. The timeline impossibly compressed, and the enemy more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. But they were no longer facing it alone. "The Zephyrians survived 2 Devourer incursions," she replied. "The crystalline hegemony has been fighting them for millennia. The Void Walkers exist in dimensions the Devourers can't even access. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting as part of a galactic community that has been preparing for this moment far longer than our species has existed." Webb monitored the tactical displays showing human space. The colonies with Guardian biotech integration are ahead of schedule on military production. When we arrive, we'll have manufacturing capabilities that didn't exist when we left, and we'll have allies willing to share technology that took them centuries to develop, Sarah added. The Devourers may have destroyed countless civilizations, but they've never faced an alliance like this one. As their ship approached Earth orbit, Sarah received a priority transmission from Admiral Rodriguez. The message was brief but significant. 3 more Guardian units had been successfully reactivated, bringing the total defensive network to 9 operational machines. More importantly, contact had been established with 2 additional species ready to join the alliance. The war against the Devourers was still months away, but humanity was no longer preparing to face it alone. The universe had revealed itself to be vast, dangerous, and filled with wonders beyond imagination, but it had also shown that intelligence, cooperation, and determination could overcome even the most ancient evils. Sarah smiled as Earth grew larger in the viewport. Humanity's greatest challenge lay ahead, but they would meet it as part of something magnificent. A galactic alliance of species united in the determination to protect organic life against the darkness between the stars. Admiral Elizabeth Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the newly constructed battleship Prometheus, watching through the reinforced viewports as the largest fleet in human history assembled in Earth orbit. 12 months of frantic preparation had transformed humanity's military capabilities beyond recognition, but the approaching enemy represented a threat older than human civilization itself. Fleet status report. She called out to her tactical coordinator. 247 vessels operational and ready. Lieutenant Commander Park replied. Guardian biotech integration at 93% across all ships. Allied technology packages have been successfully installed on our primary assault vessels. The human fleet was a marvel of hybrid engineering, combining traditional human designs with Guardian biotechnology and innovations shared by their alien allies. The ships looked organic yet mechanical, their hulls seeming to breathe while weapon systems that resembled flowering plants tracked potential targets with predatory precision. Sarah Chen joined Rodriguez on the observation deck, her role having evolved from xenoarchaeologist to strategic liaison for the Galactic Defense Alliance. The past year had aged her visibly, but her eyes held the determination of someone who had seen the face of extinction and chosen to fight. Axiom 7 reports all Guardian units are synchronized and ready, Sarah announced. The biotech networks across our colonies have reached full military production capacity. If we can hold the line here, reinforcements will continue arriving throughout the engagement. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The strategy was necessarily complex. Earth would serve as the primary defensive anchor, while Allied fleets struck at Devourer supply lines throughout the system. Meanwhile, the Guardian-enhanced colonies would serve as manufacturing centers, producing weapons and vessels using principles that merged human engineering with technologies developed by civilizations spanning millions of years. Signal from the Zephyrian contingent, reported the communications officer. Harmonizer Veltar wishes to coordinate final approach vectors. The Allied fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, Zephyrian ships that bent space around them like flowing water. Crystalline hegemony vessels that existed as geometric perfection made manifest. Flowing consciousness craft that seemed to be alive and thinking. Void walker ships that flickered in and out of visible reality. And at the center of it all, Guardian units that had awakened from centuries of slumber to coordinate the defense of organic life itself. Devourer advance elements detected entering the outer system, announced the sensor technician. Initial count estimates 12,000 vessels. Sarah felt her breath catch. 12,000 ships in the advance force alone. Intelligence suggested the main fleet comprised hundreds of thousands of vessels, but seeing even a fraction of that force approaching made the scale of the threat viscerally real. All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez, she announced over the fleet-wide communication system. Today we face an enemy that has consumed countless civilizations. But today they face something they have never encountered before. A united galaxy fighting for its survival. Remember that you carry the hopes not just of humanity, but of every species that chooses life over entropy. The Devourer ships appeared first as distortions in space, their hulls seeming to absorb light while radiating a wrongness that made the eye want to look away. They moved with purpose but without grace, their formations suggesting mechanical precision rather than living intelligence. As they drew closer, their true size became apparent. Each vessel was kilometers long, their hulls scarred by eons of warfare and conquest. "My God," whispered Webb, who had earned a position on the bridge crew after his role in the initial Guardian contact. "They're enormous." "Size isn't everything," Rodriguez replied, though privately she shared his concern. "Remember what our allies taught us. The Devourers rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. They're not expecting coordinated resistance using unfamiliar technology. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space like an artificial aurora. Devourer vessels launched weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself, while the Allied fleet responded with an arsenal that defied conventional physics. Zephyrian gravity weapons twisted space into impossible geometries. Crystalline hegemony ships fired beams of organized mathematics that unmade matter at the quantum level. Human vessels, enhanced with Guardian biotechnology, launched projectiles that learned and adapted during flight. Direct hit on lead Devourer vessel, reported the tactical officer. Target is adapting. Hull integrity recovering. Sarah had been briefed on this capability. The Devourers didn't just repair damage. They evolved defenses against weapons that had proven effective. It was one of the factors that made them so difficult to defeat conventionally. Initiating protocol synthesis, Rodriguez commanded. The Allied fleet began implementing the strategy they had developed through months of simulation and planning. Instead of maintaining consistent tactical approaches, they began cycling through combinations of technologies and strategies at random intervals. Human unpredictability combined with Zephyrian gravitational manipulation, enhanced by crystalline mathematical precision and guided by Guardian coordination protocols. The effect on the Devourer formation was immediately apparent. Their vessels began responding to threats that no longer existed, while failing to adapt to attacks they couldn't categorize. Ships that had survived for millions of years found themselves facing completely novel tactical situations every few minutes. "It's working," Sarah breathed, watching as several Devourer vessels broke formation in what appeared to be confusion. But the enemy's response was swift and terrifying. The advance fleet began transmitting data back to the main force, and the tactical displays showed the massive Devourer armada accelerating toward Earth at velocities that defied physics. "Main fleet ETA reduced to 6 hours, announced the sensor technician. "They're moving faster than our projections indicated possible." Rodriguez felt the weight of command settle heavier on her shoulders. The advanced force had been testing their capabilities, gathering intelligence for the real assault. In 6 hours, they would face numbers that could overwhelm their defenses regardless of technological advantages. "Signal all Guardian units," she ordered. "Initiate convergence protocol." Across the solar system, Guardian machines that had protected organic life for eons began implementing their final contingency plan. The biotechnology networks on human colonies shifted from production mode to direct combat participation. Entire planets became weapons in the fight against extinction. Mars transformed first, its surface erupting with crystalline growth that reached toward space like grasping fingers. The formations weren't just decorative. They were massive gravitational manipulation arrays powered by the planet's core itself. Luna followed, its familiar surface remaking itself into a geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly. "The colonies are becoming Guardian weapons platforms," Sarah explained as the tactical displays updated with readings that strained comprehension. "Axiom 7 says this has never been attempted before. We're pushing the limits of what the network can achieve." The first elements of the main Devourer fleet arrived like a dark tide washing over the outer system. Their numbers were beyond counting, ship after ship emerging from faster-than-light travel in formations that stretched across millions of kilometers. Each vessel was a monument to conquest, their hulls decorated with the remains of civilizations they had consumed. But they weren't facing the isolated species they had encountered throughout their millions of years of expansion. The Allied fleet had grown as reinforcements arrived from across the galaxy. Void walker ships materialized from dimensional folds. Flowing consciousness vessels assembled themselves from component parts that had traveled separately. Species that had never cooperated before now fought side by side against their common enemy. "Contact with Axiom 7, the communications officer reported. "The Guardian is requesting direct interface with our tactical systems." Rodriguez considered the implications. Allowing an alien artificial intelligence direct access to their command structure was an enormous risk, but conventional tactics were proving inadequate against an enemy force of this magnitude. Granted, she decided, full access. The change was immediate and dramatic. The human fleet began moving with precision that exceeded their crew's training, executing maneuvers that required split-second timing across hundreds of vessels. It was as if the entire armada had become a single organism directed by an intelligence that could process tactical variables faster than any biological mind. The battle evolved into something beyond traditional warfare. Reality itself became a battlefield as the Devourer's entropy weapons clashed with Guardian probability manipulators. Space bent and twisted under the strain of technologies that operated on fundamental forces rather than conventional physics. Devourer casualties mounting, Park reported. But they're adapting faster than our simulations predicted. They're starting to counter our technology combinations. Sarah watched the tactical displays with growing concern. The enemy's ability to evolve countermeasures was legendary, and they were facing technologies and strategies that represented millions of years of development. Eventually, even random tactical shifts would become predictable. We need something completely unprecedented, she realized. Something they've never encountered before because it's never existed before. The inspiration came from an unexpected source. Her memories of the underground chamber where they had first discovered Axiom, SE7. The slime organism hadn't just been camouflage, it had been a living interface between biological and mechanical systems. "Admiral," she said urgently, "I think I know how we can surprise them." Rodriguez looked up from the tactical displays. "What do you have in mind?" "The Guardian biotechnology isn't just augmenting our ships," Sarah explained rapidly. "It's creating a hybrid system where human intuition guides alien precision. What if we take that integration further? What if we stop fighting as separate species and start fighting as a true synthesis?" The concept was radical beyond anything they had attempted. Instead of Allied fleets cooperating, they were proposing to merge their tactical systems into a single networked consciousness guided by representatives from each species. "The risks are enormous," Rodriguez said. "If something goes wrong, we could lose coordination across the entire fleet. If we don't try something unprecedented, we're going to lose anyway," Sarah replied. "The Devourers are adapting to everything we can throw at them conventionally." Rodriguez made the decision that would either save organic life in the galaxy or doom it to extinction. "Signal all Allied commanders. We're implementing Emergency Protocol Unity." The process of merging the Allied fleet's tactical systems was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Human adaptability guided Zephyrian gravitational precision. Crystalline mathematical perfection merged with flowing consciousness distributed intelligence. Voidwalker dimensional manipulation combined with Guardian probability assessment. And at the center of it all, the biotechnological networks that connected every enhanced system across human space. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The Allied fleet stopped moving like individual ships and began flowing like a single massive organism. Attacks came from directions the Devourers couldn't anticipate because they emerged from the collective unconscious of dozens of species working in perfect harmony. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourer fleet encountered something it couldn't categorize or counter. Ships that had survived the destruction of countless civilizations found themselves facing an enemy that existed as pure cooperation made manifest. "Devourer fleet is breaking formation," Park reported with barely contained excitement. "Multiple vessels are retreating to defensive positions." But the enemy's response was swift and terrible. If they couldn't defeat the Allied fleet through conventional means, they would eliminate the source of the unprecedented coordination. Massive Devourer vessels began targeting the planets that served as network nodes for the merged tactical system. "They're going after the colonies," Rodriguez realized. "If they destroy the Guardian networks, we lose our coordination advantage." The battle became a race against time. The Allied fleet fought desperately to protect the planets that served as their nervous system, while the Devourers focused everything they had on severing the connections that made unity possible. Earth itself became the primary target as the enemy recognized it as the central coordination hub for the human networks. Devourer vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel directly above major cities, their weapons charging for attacks that would sterilize the planet's surface. But they had underestimated both human determination and Guardian preparation. The planet's surface erupted with defensive systems that had been growing in secret for months. Biotechnological networks that turned Earth itself into a fortress. Buildings became weapons emplacements. Parks transformed into shield generators. The entire biosphere joined the fight for survival. The climactic moment came when the largest Devourer vessel, a ship the size of a small moon that served as their command center, descended toward Earth's surface. Its weapons could crack continents, and its mere presence began disrupting the planetary networks that held the Alliance together. "All ships converge on the command vessel," Rodriguez ordered. "Everything we have." The entire Allied fleet threw itself at the massive Devourer ship in a coordinated assault that represented the combined military might of dozens of species. Human courage guided alien precision in an attack that lit up the sky like a second sun. When the explosion cleared, the command vessel was gone, taking with it the central coordination that held the Devourer fleet together. Across the solar system, enemy ships began withdrawing in confusion, their ancient programming unable to cope with the loss of their primary node. "Devourer fleet is retreating," Park announced, his voice barely audible over the cheering that erupted across the bridge. "Long-range sensors show them leaving the system." Rodriguez slumped in her command chair, exhaustion and relief warring in her expression. They had won, but at a cost that would take years to fully calculate. Ships had been lost, worlds scarred, and lives sacrificed in numbers that made victory feel hollow even as it ensured survival. Sarah joined her at the viewport, watching as the Allied fleet began the process of disengagement and damage assessment. In the distance, Earth turned peacefully in its orbit, scarred but intact, protected by networks that would continue to evolve and grow. "It's over," Sarah said quietly. "This battle is over," Rodriguez corrected. "But the Devourers will regroup and return with new strategies, and there are other threats out there that we haven't even imagined yet." Sarah nodded, understanding the larger truth. Humanity had passed its first test as a member of the galactic community, but it was only the beginning of a much longer journey. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with wonders and terrors beyond imagination. But it was also filled with allies, with guardian protectors that had been watching over organic life for millions of years, and with the possibility that intelligence and cooperation could overcome even the most ancient evils. As the victory celebrations began across human space, Sarah thought about Axiom 7 and the sacrifice of the predecessors that had made their survival possible. The machine had emerged from centuries of slumber to guide humanity through its darkest hour, fulfilling a purpose established by beings who had given their lives to protect species they would never meet. The universe was vast and dangerous, but it was also filled with hope. And as long as there were beings willing to fight for life against entropy, for cooperation against consumption, and for tomorrow against yesterday, that hope would continue to grow among the stars. In the depths of space, other Guardian units continued their ancient vigil, protecting species that were still growing, still learning, still preparing for challenges they couldn't yet imagine. The cycle continued as it had for millions of years, as it would for millions more, and at the center of it all was the simple, profound truth that had saved them. When organic life stands together, even the darkness between the stars cannot prevail.